What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. All that stuff goes a long way. Hey, I'm just curious, but how many of you out there are women in STEM and you need a listening ear, some consulting maybe to help navigate this world? If that is you, this is going to be a great episode for you, but really it's a great episode for anybody because there's some great career tips and advice in this episode. I bring a special guest on that runs a consulting agency. Her name is Hannah Dunham. She runs a consulting agency named Climbing Trees Consulting, but she started her career as a chemical engineer working at a paper factory and was managing 25 guys, got even further than that, had a baby, and decided that she wanted to go all in on consulting, and she does a fantastic job. And the advice she gives for women in STEM is fantastic. And really, though, I thought her advice works for everybody. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode, but Hannah goes into all the details about her journey, how she's landed where she is now, and just some great career tips. So without further ado, let's get to my episode with Hannah. I think you're going to enjoy this, and we'll see you in a minute. All right, we are rocking and rolling. Hannah, how are you? And thanks for joining the Civil Engineering Academy podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's winter time over here, so we're all free.
Wow, I didn't even ask you where you're located.
Oh, I'm actually in Utah, so we definitely have seasons.
Yes.
It's a cold one today, but it happens.
Yeah, we've had some cold weather down here in the South. I'm in Alabama, but couldn't hold a candle to what you're experiencing it.
I live in Louisiana, and I think they had one snowstorm. It was like New Year's Day. It was like a whiff. You don't see it.
Yeah, right. But everything shuts down regardless. Like we're not built for it. So.
Well, thank you for doing this. I always love to kind of kick these off. Maybe just describing your own background. I know maybe dive into your education a little bit and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So my bachelor's degree is in chemical engineering from Auburn. Pretty much I interned and then went to work full time at the same place. It was a paper mill in central Alabama. I worked there a couple of years, kind of was immediately put into a leadership position. My first role out of college was leading a crew of 25 men, and that was very jarring for me. I had no idea what I was doing. So I moved companies and then worked at another place for 5 or 6 years, worked my way up through leadership. And then I of course, as it happens, I got my dream promotion to the job I'd been working towards, and I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. So I quit my job when I had my daughter, and my plan was always to be a stay-at-home mom for a few years. I'm not built for that lifestyle. So I started to get my master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. And then 18 months into that, I started this business, which the business name is Climbing Trees Consulting. But basically what I do is individual leadership consulting with women in STEM industries. So anyone from construction to banking to tech or traditional engineering. And then I also had started doing corporate consulting where I do leadership development programs with full teams. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations on starting this fun adventure. Have you been doing it for long, or how long have you been consulting?
I started this business up just about 18 months ago. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I'm just curious about what inspired you to go this route. What was something that inspired you to flip the script from maybe working at a paper mill using the chemical engineering degree to doing consulting work?
Yeah. So really when I left the paper mill the first time, or when I had my daughter and I started to think about like what I wanted to fill my time with, I really wanted to get a master's degree, and I played around with a few different ones. I shadowed a lot of people, did a few semesters in mental health counseling, and decided that was not for me. And then kind of got aligned with a group that did some corporate consulting, and they were all IO psychologists. And so when I got that degree, I then kind of was starting to think about what I wanted to do. And I realized how many of the problems that I had struggled with from specifically being like the only female in that industry. And I thought, what if I can open a business that specifically tries to solve that problem, which obviously it's an enormous systemic problem. But if I could be a part of that to try to make it a little bit easier for the women who are trying to navigate these industries, I just thought that would be the coolest thing ever. So that's kind of how I started this business. I kind of did it on a whim, like, let's just try it out. If it doesn't work in a few years, then I always have an engineering degree to fall back on, that kind of thing.
True.
Yeah. So I just thought, well, my plan was to be a stay-at-home mom. That didn't work out. Let's try something else and see what happens. So, yeah.
Wow. So the consulting side of this, you're focused on women in STEM.
Mm-hmm.
What have been, in your opinion, some of the biggest challenges that you've faced with that women are seeing in the industry and that you're helping with?
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit to kind of the individual issues that I see a lot of women facing, and then some that are like the bigger systemic things. I think individually, a lot of women, I would say 95% of them really struggle with owning their voice in a male-dominated industry. So they just simply don't know how to connect all of these ideas that they have in their mind that are worth saying to their voice. And they're scared of being wrong. They're scared of just really like showing up as their full selves. They're scared of being authentically kind of female in these traditionally male environments. And that's hard. I faced that myself. So, individually, confidence is, it's like the cliche answer, but it's unfortunate, it's just true. That's really what they're facing. And then, systemically, I think a lot of women struggle when they become moms to stay in these industries that have never historically had to support moms. And they don't know how to advocate for their needs. And often their needs as mothers are treated like inconveniences. And that's really difficult. That's when a lot of women leave the industry. I think the stat is by the time a woman is 35, like 75% of engineers in STEM industries, they've left to go do other things. And I mean, that's my story as well. So yeah, that's a really difficult thing that women are facing regularly.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. You feel like there's more flexibility, especially, kind of when COVID hit, there was all this flexibility, and now that's kind of feels like it's rolling back a little bit. But especially when you're a new mother, there's definitely, flexibility that needs to happen. And people have lives and need to take care of kids or whatever the issue is, doctor, and then your kid gets sick and you gotta stay home now.
Right.
So yeah, I can definitely see that happening. In terms of, what you were doing at your work, you were managing 25 men. What was the position that you held there? What was that called?
So that was my first job. It's basically a frontline leader position. So I was working Southern swing shift, leading a crew of men. So it was a crew of 25 operators who were running the paper machine. And I was, just honestly there for a little bit as like, so, you have to have a manager out here. It might as well be her. And then eventually over time, when I started getting my bearings and learning the process, I was able to actually contribute a little bit more.
That makes sense.
But yeah, that was my first role. It was the lifestyle of working shift work is absolutely wild. And I would almost wish it on nobody, but I learned so much in that role. I would want everybody to have to go through a role like that if you're going to work in manufacturing, because you have to understand the lifestyle of the people who are running your equipment, and being able to like get in their mindset is invaluable for sure.
Was it running just 24/7? Was it open all the time?
Yes. So that shift schedule was like 7 midnights, 3 days off, 7 evening shifts, 2 days off, 7-day shifts, 5 days off. So you had 1 weekend off a month. It was crazy. I'm like, wait, did I actually do that? It feels like a different lifetime ago. So
You did do that. So I'm just curious, managing 25 guys there, were there some challenges that you particularly faced or things that you learned of that you are now applying to those with those you consult?
Yes. I mean, specifically, it's helpful for me to know kind of the different, both the frontline leader position in a paper mill environment and then also being the female, having the perspective of that. Honestly, I think doing those jobs and then, the last job I held was a team of 118 men and 2 women. So that was the team that I led my last job there. And under doing that actually gave me a more generous view of the men that I was surrounded by. So I think we walk into these environments very intimidated by all of the men that we're surrounded by, and we think that they are underestimating us. And a lot of times it is true that they do not really necessarily know how to interact with the women because they haven't had to in the past from like a managerial standpoint. But that doesn't mean that they aren't willing to help and be like actually incredibly helpful. So, being forced to be interactive with them on that level really showed me how invested and interested they were in helping me advance my career. And just like, if I showed interest, they would match that kind of energy thing. So I think, a lot of the fears that I had of working in this male dominated industry were kind of, lessened a lot by just developing relationships with these people and realizing like they are here to help me just as they would anybody else. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I like what you said. Like if you come in and match that kind of energy, they match it too. It's like, what are you putting into this? And they match. They want to help. They want to be there, and they match that energy level. So I like how you said that.
I tell a lot of women, like, you are going to have conversations about tractors and fishing and hunting and like things that you have no interest in. And that is okay. Like, just keep at it. Tell me more. That's all you have to say. And that will build the foundation of a relationship so that they trust you. And then you can build like your technical knowledge on that. They'll teach you the process. They'll teach you how things go, all of it. So just be willing to talk about hunting and fishing and you'll be fine.
Love it. So you were a leader. What are some leadership skills that you're seeing that may be crucial for women in STEM?
I think the number one thing is having difficult conversations with people. And I don't think that this is specific to women. I think everybody shies away from having tough conversations, whether it's, stepping up to the plate and asking your boss to like give you a raise, or if it's, telling an employee that they're not meeting your expectations or holding them accountable to those expectations. Like that process is so anxiety ridden for so many people. And it's really, we're engineers. We love to have like a process, and it feels like there's so many uncontrollables in that thing. You don't know how the person's going to react. You don't know what the emotions are going to be, all of that. And it's really hard for people to want to engage in those conversations. But obviously it's a key part of leadership. You kind of have to. So really like giving women a playbook for how those conversations are supposed to go. Like, if you can write it down in kind of an agenda, you can conceptualize how that's going to go. If you have a game plan for how to manage those emotions, if somebody's getting upset or angry, like you know what to do in that situation. It's just a matter of strategy. So that's the one I find, a lot. The other, probably the biggest one is like, I work with a lot of like high achieving control freaks, to be honest. Like, they don't want to release control of anything because like their worth is so often tied to their productivity and their ability to do things super efficiently. And so when they get into these leadership positions, they've taken on the roles of like 10 jobs past, and they carried them with them. And now they're burnt out beyond recognition, So it's like, okay, how do we delegate some of this stuff to give you a breather, but then also, teaching them that is good development for your direct reports, and your job now includes like growing them. So how do you both take something off of your plate and also developing your employees? The answer is delegating, but often it's like working through the like, okay, let's release control of this kind of stuff, and it's actually a good thing.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And great advice. I was just thinking, you started out, you went to school, you became a chemical engineer. Um, how, in this whole industry, engineering in general seems to be male dominated, but what are you seeing out there? How do we get more women involved in engineering in the first place? I know there's obviously a problem to be solved with helping women in the industry. How do you initially kind of point women to go there?
Yeah, there's so many good organizations now that are all focused on getting girls involved in STEM industries from a young age. So, there's a lot of statistics around just the fact that like girls are not introduced to STEM nearly as much as boys are. So then they're just naturally inclined to go the routes that they have been introduced to. So early intervention is part of that. Um, I partner with Auburn, which is the college that I went to, and they have an entire organization just aimed at retaining their female engineering students. And they did, data on the women who are dropping out of engineering classes, and they found that really it was like early the early kind of like the core curriculum that they were dropping out in, because they kept thinking, if I can't do this, then I can't continue on to do the engineering classes. So that school has
Like
put
in their
in place,
second year,
right,
second
like
year
Cal
school.
3 or, organic chemistry and stuff like that. So then that made them feel like, if I can't even pass organic chemistry, how am I ever going to, do chemical transport too? So it's kind of like that problem. So they've put in a lot of intervention methods in those, classes to help those women pass them, basically to give them a confidence boost for later on. And we've actually seen a really good retention of them from those programs. So yeah, it's early intervention, and then it's supporting them when you don't have a lot of people to rely on that are women in those classes. So that, I think the combination of those two things is super helpful. And also just education as to what an engineer can be. I don't think that everybody knows exactly. If you don't, like, aren't born into an engineering family, you may not know like the possibilities of it.
Right.
And there's so many women doing such cool things in the engineering field who are doing it on public platforms now, like on Instagram and LinkedIn, that I think there's so much more insight into what a female engineer could be now than even when I was, in school, which I think will only kind of help the cause for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's definitely some great stuff out there. So, um, I think it was very insightful. It makes me think I have 3 daughters, so I'm like, maybe I need to start introducing them to engineering. It starts,
Yeah. Yeah, and just, even as simple as like Googling STEM programs in your city, like you'd be surprised how many there are. A lot of people doing things nationwide for girls who are interested in STEM. So
Hmm.
it's very cool.
Hannah, did you have a good mentor when you had finished school or while you were in school that kind of helped you learn the ropes?
Yes, and he was a very unsuspecting type. So
Hmm.
when I was co-oping at the paper mill, I walked in on the paper machine floor like the first day, and I was like, I just have to get these 4 months over with, and then I'm never coming back here ever again. Like, it was so overwhelming to me. Were no females around anywhere. And I pretty much sat in my office for the first month that I was there. And I was like, they can come to me if they want me to do something. Like, I was just so overwhelmingly intimidated by it all. And that guy, he was a old school paper maker. He like walked with his head cocked from wearing a radio on his shoulder for 40 years. Like, he came into my office one day and he was like, you're not sitting in here anymore. He was like, come out with me on the floor and I'm going to teach you some stuff. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to teach you, but you just can't stay in here anymore, you know? And from that moment on, he really like took me by the hand. And then my confidence from that interaction grew. Like, he gave me permission and like a playbook on how to interact with people that I, thought I had nothing in common with. He'd like pull me into the control room. And that's when those like hunting and fishing conversations started, you know? And that truly like changed the trajectory. I don't know what I would have done if it hadn't been for his involvement in that co-op semester. And then I came back for 2 more terms, and then I went back to work there full time, and that kind of like was paved the way for my career. And he was always like brutally honest with me, which I loved and I think was so helpful for me when a lot of people were sugarcoating the truth to me because I was a female and they didn't know how I would react. And I remember when we left, my husband and I left to go to the other mill, he said, "You come off like really standoffish at first." He's like, "You're going to have a really hard time building relationships when you get there." And I was like, I can't do anything but agree with you or listen to you and take that advice and try to do something with it, you know? And no one else is being honest with me that way. And it hurt my feelings, of course, but it helped me so much to have somebody like that who was just like, "I don't care about your emotions. I'm going to tell it to you how it is." So yeah, I tell everybody about him because he was like instrumental in my career, truly.
That's amazing. Well, it's always nice to have someone pull you out of your comfort zone a little bit and
Yeah, absolutely.
also be there to help guide you. So that's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
I imagine, you know, women that do find themselves in this industry, it is important to find someone, even if it's outside their organization, that they can connect with and maybe help them learn the ropes on this journey. So I'm sure there's a lot of organizations out there, but I mean, even what you're doing now, I think is super helpful for women so they can connect with you on that
Mhm.
front. But yeah, I totally agree. Finding a mentor is good. Any tips around finding a mentor? Or, I mean, yours kind of pulled you out of there, but
Yeah.
any tips there?
Yeah, I think that the most like helpful mentors that I've had were the ones that happened like organically. You know, I think that we have this view of mentorship like, you know, it has to be this formal relationship that you've built with somebody. And it can be that for sure. For me personally, the ones that I really felt like I was getting something out of my career for were the ones that kind of developed like that, where it was like, oh, this person has knowledge and insight that I don't have, and I need that. So let me spend time with them. Let me ask them questions, and hopefully they're receptive to that. I do think that there are points in a woman's career where it is incredibly important to have female insight. So, specifically at the beginning of your career, when you are confused about what all the dynamics that you've never experienced before, having somebody to go to where it's like, okay, is this normal? Is this normal? How much do I accept? What do I go to HR for? Like, all of those things are just, what do I wear? Like, those questions are you have to learn, but you don't know how to learn them. And then the other time would be when, if you are looking to become a mother and you're trying to understand how the intersection of motherhood and your life as an engineer would possibly fit together. I think that was a huge misstep of mine, which was I did not have, I was the, you know, I was the only pregnant woman who'd ever come through that mill before in a management position. And so I had nobody to ask. And if I could have done it differently, I would have reached out to other people in the industry who had done it successfully just to really weigh my options a little bit more versus saying, "I'm pregnant. I can't do this. I'm done," you know?
Right.
So, and sometimes you have to pay for support like that. And that's not a pitch for me. Like, you know it too.
Yeah.
There's certain things that if you don't have access to the mentorship or the leadership development, like you have to be willing to invest in yourself to get those things that you need to advance your career. And I think that's what sets people apart when if their willingness to do that.
Yeah, for sure. No, great tips there. Um, you've been helping people for a while now. Have you had any really neat, successful stories from somebody that you've helped?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is I've helped a lot of people simply, you know, either get, you know, equal pay and salary negotiations are like near and dear to my heart because,
Mhm.
you know, women are chronically underpaid in STEM industries and the gender wage gap in STEM is actually getting bigger, not smaller. So
Oh,
this is like, you know, something I will go to battle with. If I always tell clients like on just, you know, strategy or discovery calls with me, I'm like, if you don't want to raise right now, by the time we are done working together, you will have negotiated your salary. Like that, it's what I am like, you know, we'll go to war over.
you were
Gosh,
passionate
so
about
Yes, very passionate. So I help a lot of women use their voice to get what they need out of their career. And, like I had a client text me a couple of days ago telling me she got a $45,000 raise after a 1 hour conversation. So when you think about investing in yourself, if you can learn those skills to get to the table and negotiate your salary, what you have paid me or anybody else, or you, like you for, the PE work, what you've paid to invest in that versus the dividends that it can possibly pay,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just like pennies on the dollar. So that's always really fun. I had a client who works in construction get their promotion timeline moved up by a year just by having a conversation. I mean, sometimes we think that our bosses are mind readers and we think that they know what we want out of our careers. And unless you have explicitly stated that, probably a couple times, it doesn't exist in your boss's mind. At least you should just proceed that way. And so a lot of it's really just me facilitating their success by using their voice. Like if I can empower them to do that, they can go and get whatever they want out of their career. So that's really fun.
And there's nothing worse, if you're a woman working and you find out, what others are making around you and you're doing the same work. I mean,
The resentment that lives in that
yeah,
kind of is
just
just
you
outrageous.
hate your job, you're resentful, you hate your boss, and they have no idea.
And it's sometimes impossible to come back from, like the resentment that they feel when they found out that they were doing the same work for, $30,000. Like they sometimes can't be, that situation can't be resurrected. In that case, like we're moving on. We're finding you another job.
That makes sense. Are there any good practical tips that you could share for women that may be finding themselves in that boat right now?
For salary negotiation?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. So a couple of the ones that you won't find, like if you just Google them. So you obviously always want to come to the table with, a serious list of specific metric wins. So not just, I helped this team do this. Like what was the outcome of that tied to a number? Right. Everything you say in that meeting should be tied to a number. And the same with your resume if you're looking for a job. Like metrics speak volumes, especially when you're asking for $40,000 and you saved the company 100. Like the ROI of giving you that raise is like very clear for them to see. So that's like number one thing is when you're going to the table, you also need to have a good understanding of the market value for your position and how to argue for that. So here's, you're not arguing for dollars. You're asking for the company to value your contributions this much by $20,000 more than what you are now. So if you can tie what you're asking for to the value that you bring to the company, that is really where it's hard to say no to that situation. And then the last one, this is classic, and this is great advice for any kind of situation where you are asking for anything from anybody, is a lot of women want to say, I want to be making $150,000. That's the goal here. And then they'll say, but if that's not possible, then it's, really I'd be okay with 20. Or, but if that's not possible right now, like maybe we can revisit this in 6 months. They feel so uncomfortable with asking that question that then they give the person on the other end of it all of these reasons why they don't actually want that. So the best thing is say, I want $50,000, $150,000. And then you have to sit in awkwardness,
Yep.
but you won't die. Like you just have to get through the awkwardness. Like you're requesting something. It is on them to give you an answer. If you give them an out, they're going to take it. So just sit in the silence and ask for it and be confident in what you're asking for. And don't give them an out. That's the best tip, I think, because I think that's where a lot of people lose the negotiation is right there.
Oof. Good tips. Good tips. Good tips for anybody, really.
Yeah. No, yeah. I know it is.
Awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure to talk and hear everything that you're doing in your life and kind of just your history. But I would love to hear how women can connect with you. Give us the website. If they need to chat with you, give us all the details.
Yeah, so you can always find me on LinkedIn, Hannah Dunham, or on Instagram, STEM Coach Hannah. So and climbingtreesconsulting.com, but I don't, you know, I'm more present on the social media channels for sure. So
All right. Well, if you need help, go get a consulting call. Go get everything you're offering because I think it's going to be good stuff. So,
yeah.
Hannah, thanks for doing this with me, and hopefully we'll
Thanks
chat
so
in the
much.
future.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.